York County is so much more than just a stop for gas along I-80. 17 County is filled with unique individuals with unique stories, just wanting to be told.
Welcome to another episode of 17 County Podcast, where we spotlight the people, projects, and progress powering growth across our region. From business expansion to community revitalization, we bring you behind the scenes of what's shaping our future. We're proud to recognize the organizations that make this podcast possible. A special thank you to the dedicated stakeholders investing in local impact. Central Valley Ag, Clutie Incorporated, Overland Ready Mix, Collins Aerospace, Meade Lumber Company, and Perennial Public Power District. We're also grateful for the continued support of our financial stakeholders, Henderson State Bank, Midwest Bank, and York State Bank, who help drive business sustainability across the county. Empowering innovation and reliability behind the scenes, we recognize K-Junction, OPPD, and Nebraska Public Power District. Your support fuels the stories we share and the future we're building together. Now, let's get into today's episode. Today's guest brings both deep roots and broad horizons to the table. Elizabeth Fillman, now one of the leading attorneys at Fillman Law Offices in York, grew up right here in our community before taking off to pursue education at a prestigious university and practice law in major metro areas. Her journey is one of ambition, excellence, and ultimately choosing to come home. We're thrilled to hear how her experiences shaped her career and what it means to be practicing law where your story began. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I am really excited to hear your story because I know a little bit about it, but I know there's so much more to dive into. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I guess let's go back all the way to the beginning. You grew up here in York, right?
I sure did.
What was it like growing up here?
Oh, I loved growing up in York. I think it's such a good town to grow up in. It's such a solid community. Being in a small town, I had the opportunity to be involved in anything that I was interested in being involved in. And it's been just as welcoming coming back.
Good. I love that. Did you always know that law was, the path that you wanted to pursue?
Kind of. I will say I grew up in my family firm, kind of, answering the phones on snow days when the staff couldn't make it in and helping my dad and grandpa with filing projects and different things. So I had exposure from a really early age to what the practice of law looks like, at least in the context of like a small town generalist attorney. And so that was really helpful. But I wanted to make sure that that was definitely what I wanted to do. So a huge part of that decision for me also was doing the mock trial team at York High.
Sure.
So once I did that, I realized I absolutely loved it. I had so much fun on the mock trial team. And that was pretty much it. And I had my heart set on law school after that.
So can we talk a little bit about mock trial? Because I think there's a lot of people that probably have no idea what that is. So what is that?
Sure, absolutely. So mock trial is kind of like, what would I compare it to? It's an extracurricular activity that high school students at York High can participate in. Usually it is supervised by a combination of a teacher and an attorney or both. At the time, the coach was Jane Brogan, who was both a teacher and an attorney. She still is. And essentially, different attorneys in Nebraska will work together to create a fake case and fake witnesses. It might be, I think one year it was like a murder case or something to that effect. And teams have to prepare to present arguments and do witness examinations on either side. And so you would have a team of students that would play both witnesses and attorneys. You would give opening statements, closing arguments, do direct examinations, cross-examinations, learn the rules of evidence, and you would go to a real courthouse and compete in front of attorneys who volunteer as judges to compete against other high schools in the region. So it was a very helpful look into what it is to be a trial attorney.
Sure, that's interesting. I think that's obviously a really good way to figure out if that's what you want to do, right? So you graduate, you love this. What happened next? What was the steps after that?
So after I graduated from York High, I went to the University of Nebraska, Lincoln for undergrad. I studied political science and sociology, and I had a minor in human rights and humanitarian affairs. Interesting.
So what does that minor entail?
Oh, it's, lots of different things. I think it aligned well with the sociology classes that I was taking. But yeah, so long ago, it's hard to tell you what the classes exactly entailed. But definitely, human rights is an interest of mine, plays into, my day-to-day now as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you did that. I'm assuming throughout that you always knew that law school was the next step.
Yes.
How did that look? What was that process like?
So I started studying for the LSAT probably when I was a junior in college, and I took that twice.
Okay, and then where did you end up going?
I went to Harvard Law School.
Very cool. Very cool. And what made you decide on that school as opposed to anything else?
Well, I did look at a couple of different schools, but Harvard has an excellent reputation, of course, for consistently turning out some of the top, attorneys in the country. And I knew that I would get a strong education. I knew that the name recognition for Harvard Law School would open a lot of doors, which is always helpful. And I liked that Harvard was a bigger school than a lot of Ivy League law schools. I forget exactly how many people were in my graduating class, but I want to say it was around 500.
Okay.
Whereas at a school like Yale Law School, you might have a graduating class closer to 200. And so going to Harvard, I had the opportunity to just make more friends, do more activities, and meet more people and just be more involved on campus. So
yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about involvement, what does that look like? Because law school is no joke. I mean, from what I've heard, it's pretty intense. So how did you find time for anything extra?
Yeah, it definitely was an intense time. I learned a lot. I remember my first year of law school realizing one day that I had already been reading the assigned text for that single day for like 7 hours and I still wasn't done. And so it definitely can be a very time consuming thing. However, you kind of get in your curve and once you get past the first year, there's definitely a lot more time for involvement in extracurriculars. So I was involved in a number of extracurriculars. I was on the Journal of Law and Gender. I joined the Women's Law Association, and I did a lot of kind of fun extracurricular activities. So there's an organization called HL Central, which was in charge of planning things like Barrister's Ball. That wasn't actually Barrister's Ball. I was a class marshal, which planned Barrister's Ball. And then for HL Central, we planned things like bar review every Thursday night. We would pick a bar and we would work with the bar to coordinate, and everybody would come out to that bar for that night and just different things like that. So that was a fun thing that I did. What else did I do? My favorite thing that I did in law school actually was the law school musical. People called it parody. Other law schools have something similar. They may call it Law Review, REVUE. And it is a full musical performance, 2 acts, written, directed, performed entirely by law students. And they'll pick an existing franchise such as Harry Potter, and then they'll rewrite the story to be about the law school and kind of poke fun at the law school. They won't poke fun at specific individual students, but they do poke fun at the professors. It's pretty good. It's I had a really fun time with that, and that's how honestly I met so many of my closest friends from law school.
That's amazing. I've never heard of that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you had this fantastic experience, it sounds like, at Harvard Law. You graduate, and then, big world. What do you do after that?
So I knew I wanted to live in New York City after graduating. Growing up, I always was super enamored by the idea of living in a big city on the coast by the ocean. And after spending some time in Boston, I knew I wanted to go a little bit bigger than that. So I had my heart set on New York City. So after graduating, I started work at a firm in New York City, got an apartment in the West Village, and began my practice in mergers and acquisitions.
Wow. New York is very different than York.
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Oh, it was wonderful. New York is such a vibrant, fun city. What I always say about New York is that the cool thing is that it's so diverse. There are so many people there. There's always so much going on that 2 different people could go to New York City and have just such a vastly different experience. If you're into art, for example, you could go there for a week and just go to museums. Museum after museum after museum, art gallery openings in Chelsea, all of that. If you're into theater, probably no better place in the world for that, right? You want to be a foodie, you want to go check out some of the best restaurants in the world, go to some fancy cocktail bars. They're there. So, the world's at your fingertips, and you have the opportunity to have whatever kind of experience you're looking for, which is the cool thing about New York.
Wow. Yeah, I've never been, but someday we'll make it that way.
Well, hit me up if you ever want Rex.
There we go. So what made you choose to leave New York, and where did you go after that?
So I left New York for a few reasons. I think, I loved living in New York. I was having so much fun. I still have so many wonderful friends. But ultimately, the cost of living was very, very high. I was living in a 270 square foot studio apartment for, I think, $2,800 a month in rent, which was just steep. It was a little too much. And I started thinking about, okay, someday I would like to buy a house. I missed driving a car. I missed peace and quiet. I missed seeing grass and trees. And, I just started kind of itching for things that I was more used to, sure, and sort of a calmer, quieter existence. Another big thing was that, growing up in a community like York, I missed being able to walk down the street and bump into people I know,
sure,
or being a regular at a coffee shop, or, just that sense of community and belonging that you get somewhere like York. And so I started to think about, okay, I want to keep the job that I have for right now, at least. What cities could I move to that are a little bit slower paced, a little bit better cost of living? Maybe I could kind of recreate that sense of community that I've been longing for, while still working in the mergers and acquisition space. So I started interviewing, and then I got a job with another firm doing the same thing, essentially, in Washington, D.C. And then I got an apartment in Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of D.C. Okay.
And I should have asked this earlier, but why did you choose that sort of law to go into? Like, why was that something that drew you so much?
Honestly, when I went to law school, I didn't really even know mergers and acquisitions or corporate law was a thing. It was not something I really ever had exposure to, but I thought that it was very interesting. I liked that you were kind of working with somebody on the other side to reach a solution to a problem rather than having something necessarily adversarial. Now, I did learn later that, I kind of enjoy the adversarial process.
Sure,
and of course, that is what I do now for the most part. But, it's more like working with language to craft something that fits exactly what you're looking for. And I found that really stimulating and interesting. I interned with the law firm. I had the opportunity to try out a few different areas of law, and that was the one that just clicked for me the most.
Interesting. There's so many different sorts that it's kind of crazy to hear about everything. But
yeah, that's the cool thing about a law degree. You could do so many different things with a law degree, and many people do. They start off doing one type of law, then they parallel to something else. It just kind of depends, on your trajectory.
Sure. So, okay, let's go back to DC. I kind of got off the rails there.
All good.
So what was that like? I mean, I know it's so rich in, history and culture there. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, I loved Washington, D.C. I also had, luckily, a lot of friends from law school in D.C. as well, and friends from undergrad, actually. So there was a strong connection there, which was a huge part of what drew me there as well. Still lots to do, lots of fun restaurants, museums, obviously huge city with huge cultural and historical significance for the United States. So that was a cool thing also to get to experience. It was definitely slower paced than New York, I would say, and the cost of living was better. So I got to kind of get a feel for, oh yeah, this is what it's like being around green space or driving a car again. I bought a car. So, it was kind of the nice thing about DC, and it reaffirmed my desire to kind of move in that direction towards a slower pace of life, towards a better cost of living, towards prioritizing being part of a community.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you're in DC, living in Virginia, right?
Right.
then what came after that? What was next?
So I started thinking about pivoting on both a career level and a personal level. I had a taste of, moving in the direction that I was looking to move in, but I felt I didn't quite go far enough. And so I started thinking about, what that might look like. And I talked to my dad, and, he reminded me, of course, you can always come home and practice at Fillman Law. And it was something that hadn't really occurred to me. I think I was like trying to recreate what already exists here in York in Virginia. I was like looking at small towns in rural Virginia that I could move to and then commute long distances to my big law job. And I realized, wow, I really miss Nebraska, and I could actually just move back, and this job is here waiting for me. I could work with my dad, learn from him, and just have a way better quality of life. So that was kind of how that conversation happened.
Yeah, and then you came to York eventually, right?
Yes, I did. I arrived back in York in late November, started at Fillman Law. I took a little time off, started at Fillman Law in December, and I've been here ever since.
Man, and so you said that the law that you do right now is a little bit different. So what all do you do now? I know it's small town.
Oh, yeah. But... No, it's, the thing about being a small town lawyer is you have to kind of do a little bit of everything. There aren't enough lawyers or enough people for me to, if I were to just do mergers and acquisitions, that would be, it would be hard to keep the business afloat.
Yeah.
But, I do a lot of different things. My practice is primarily criminal defense, family law, which would look like child custody cases, divorces. We do trusts and estates as well. That's a big part of our business. We help small businesses as well. So somebody wants to buy or sell a small business, that's something we could do. We do a lot of forming LLCs or sort of general advising on that front. What else? I mean, we do some personal injury things basically, if somebody has a legal problem, if we're able to, we try to help.
That's amazing. That's a lot. That's amazing.
Yeah, but I really like that though, because it's never boring. Every day is different. I get to work with so many different people on so many different kinds of legal issues, and I just find that so interesting and fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you came from what I think of as very large places. Even DC seems hard to imagine for me.
It is. Yeah.
But I guess what was your perspective on York when you came back? What was that like? I mean, it's definitely a different pace. I mean, it's a little bit slower. I know you grew up here, but what was that change in perspective like?
Sure. It was a lot easier acclimating to York after being in big cities than I expected it to be. I think a huge part of that is that York as a community has been so welcoming, and so many wonderful opportunities have presented themselves. I was asked to join the board of directors of United Way of York, which is a charity organization, so I'm involved with that. I joined Rotary Club. And I've gotten to just meet so many different people and become involved with so many different things that I think it's definitely kept me busy. And I've had the opportunity to just get to know and interact with so many different people. And I think because I was longing for the peace and quiet, the slower pace of life, all of that, it was just really easy. And, the thing is, when I was thinking about leaving the East Coast and leaving the city life, I thought about, okay, realistically, what am I giving up? And when you really think about it, I mean, obviously, like, Lincoln is not New York City, right?
Sure.
But Lincoln has a lot of really good restaurants. There's great theater. There are lots of concerts that you can go to. Pretty much any, if there's an artist I want to see, I can make that happen from here. You don't really sacrifice what people might lead you to believe you're sacrificing. I still have great meals out. There's plenty to do. And, you also get the added benefit of kind of those cute, small town, charming Hallmark movie type events. Like when I first came back, I went to the Christmas parade, which was so cute. And people had like tractors with little Christmas lights on them. And, I love going to the pumpkin patch and things like that. So I feel like it's a you get a lot of it. You can get pretty much anything that you would be looking for here. You may have to drive a little bit, but at the end of the day, I mean, when I was living in New York City, like, you could go from Manhattan to Brooklyn and it could take you an hour depending on where you're going, right? That's like a drive from York to Lincoln, not even. So it just really didn't feel like that much of a sacrifice of really anything.
Sure. Was there anything when you came back to York that was surprising? I mean, even if it's from, practicing law or living here, whatever, was there any surprises in there?
Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me the most was how many friends I had that either were still here or had moved back. I think obviously there are some friends that I've just been in touch with this entire time, but there also are a lot of friends that I kind of over the years hadn't talked to as much, and I didn't realize they were back in town or that they were planning on moving back to town. And so it's been really wonderful reconnecting with people, and I feel like that's been just a huge, wonderful part of this.
At Cornerstone Bank, we are committed to providing you the best in banking products and service. With 46 locations throughout Nebraska, we are dedicated to serve you. Cornerstone Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Southeast Community College and Tallgrass. Let's get back to the podcast. So we kind of touched on your work right now with Fillman Law Offices, and it's a little bit of everything. I know this is a hard question, but what does your typical day look like? I know.
That is a hard question. I'll kind of start my day by looking over my to-do list. I'm very type A in that respect. I keep an extremely detailed to-do list on a daily basis. And, I'll start by I walk into the office. I'll make a cup of coffee. I'll chat with my support staff. They're wonderful. And then I'll kind of start looking over my to-do list and start making calls, returning emails. It just depends on the day. Some days I'll have a court hearing. Some days I'll have client meetings or client calls. Some days I'm here doing things like, this podcast. And so it definitely varies a lot. But it's a lot of person-to-person conversations, meetings, and then, of course, time spent in court.
Sure. Do you have a favorite part of what you do or a favorite type of law that you practice right now?
Ooh, that's kind of a hard question. I think, one thing that I really like about this job is I feel like I'm making a difference in my community and really getting to help people. We're fortunate that, there's enough demand for attorneys here in York that we get to be pretty selective about which cases we take on. And so I get to take on cases I'm really passionate about. So, for example, one thing that I really care about a lot is helping victims of domestic violence.
Sure.
And so in the family law space, I have the opportunity to do a lot of that. I think that sometimes victims really need an advocate. They need somebody who can help them understand the system and who can explain the nuances that come with being a victim of domestic violence. It's not the same as a lot of other crimes that people can be victims of. In domestic violence situations, people don't, for example, always leave their abuser right away.
Sure. And
that can be hard for people in the system to understand. And so having an advocate who understands that, who can explain it, and who has that kind of compassionate aspect to it, I think is really important. And so it's been really meaningful to me to get to be involved with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely making a difference in that space. So let's kind of look into the future. What are your goals for the legal practice, for the community involvement? What does the future for you look like?
That is a great question. So right now, as far as attorneys go at the firm, it's pretty much just me and my dad. So I think that, looking ahead to the future, given the high demand that there is for, attorney work in York and the surrounding communities, we help people out, all around the surrounding areas as well. We take cases Grand Island, Lincoln, you name it. And I'd like to bring on another attorney or two. That's a little bit, in the future, I think, but that's definitely something that I have my eye on, and maybe involving, being a little bit more involved in other communities nearby, such as Stromsburg, for example, Osceola. Those are a couple things that we're looking ahead to. And in terms of community involvement, I feel like the sky's the limit. There are so many different ways to be involved in the community. It's something that's very important to me. I think, volunteering, giving back, and doing things that bring joy. Don't be surprised if you see me auditioning for some local community theater plays later,
absolutely.
right? Or I've had the opportunity to get pretty involved in, like helping animals. So I volunteered Adopt a Pet. Mm-hmm. I volunteered transporting injured wildlife to Nebraska Wildlife Rehab in Omaha. Yeah. So like when people end up, I found an injured turtle who'd been run over by a car last week myself. But when other people do, there's kind of a group of us and we coordinate and we can help bring those animals to licensed rehabbers, namely Nebraska Wildlife Rehab in Omaha. So
neat.
Yeah,
Neat.
It's been cool. I recently brought a snapping turtle to Omaha, and I'd never seen one before, and I didn't know that they can extend their neck extremely far and fast.
Oh no.
And it about got me, but it was a fun, interesting experience.
Yeah, how did you get involved in that? That's such an interesting, niche thing.
I think, I've always loved animals, and I think that's something that the people in my life definitely know. And I'm always, when I was young, I was always rescuing mice out of traps, or I one time nursed an injured bat back to life by myself when I was very young, unbeknownst to my parents. Sorry, Mom and Dad. But so I think once that kind of became known, and I moved back and expressed an interest in that, people just put me in touch with kind of the right people to make that happen. So
that's so neat.
Yeah.
So looking into kind of the trends that are going on right now, do you see anything that's emerging or that is going to be emerging in small town law practice for trends?
For trends, I would say, one big, I don't know if it's a trend because I've only been here a few months, but one thing is there definitely is, a high demand for attorneys. Our phone is always ringing off the hook, and I do my best to try to get back to people as quickly as I can. But, there definitely just is a lot of need here. That's one thing that has stuck out to me. One thing that is a new development, I guess, in the space that I'm in that I'm really happy about is the development of the diversion program here in York for adults. They're in the Fillman building, which is right next door to our office. And, that's just such a wonderful program, and I think helps people address the underlying needs or whatever's going on with them in a way that I think aims to rehabilitate rather than kind of punish people charged with crimes. And so I think that's a really wonderful program because, a criminal charge can have a really negative effect on people. It can affect their job. It can affect their reputation, depending what it is. And, my job, of course, if hired by someone charged with a crime, is to help mitigate that and address those concerns to the best I can. But, the best thing that you can do is prevent yourself from being charged with that crime to begin with, which, the diversion program kind of helps with. So that's a wonderful program that the county attorney's office has spearheaded and I think heavily, worked to put into effect. And I think that it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Absolutely. And I'm going to get a little bit off course here just because I have a lot of curiosity, but you are very busy. It's very obvious you have a lot on your plate.
Yes.
How do you stay organized? How do you keep track of everything?
My to-do list. I live and die by my to-do list. I am constantly updating it on an hour-by-hour basis. That is the biggest thing. And then I definitely rely heavily on my support staff. I've got 2 members of my support staff team who are just wonderful. And I would not be able to do this job without them. So
yeah, absolutely. Kudos to you. I would be very tired, so I'm in awe. So how do you, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but how do you stay sharp and challenged in work?
I think that the way that my job is just so varied kind of naturally has that effect, but coffee doesn't hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So now we're going to move on to kind of a more fun segment. It's rapid fire. So first thing that pops into your head.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
If you need to talk about it and think about it, I do too. So it's okay. Do you have a favorite local coffee or lunch spot?
Okay. Well, in York, my favorite coffee shop is Mac's, of course.
Yeah.
Outside of York, I also really like to go to a coffee shop. It's called Expressions in Aurora.
Okay.
It's super, super cute and cozy, and they have like little book clubs and things. I take on a lot of cases out of Aurora or Hamilton County. And so my dad and I often are there in court. And so whenever we have the opportunity to, we go there for coffee.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. Favorite legal movie and why?
My favorite legal movie, you might guess, is Legally Blonde.
Of course, yeah.
Obviously, the Harvard law of it all I love, but Legally Blonde actually had a huge influence on me when I was young, which sounds kind of silly, but I think that representation in film is really important, especially for young people, because sometimes that's how we understand what's possible in our lives and we understand the world beyond what our own personal experiences are. And so, one thing that has deeply affected me throughout my life is, I think, being a woman and being someone who presents as like very feminine. I'm a girly girl. I'm very bubbly personality. People sometimes discount that or take me less seriously. And that's something I've had to contend with my entire life. And as a young girl, seeing a character like Elle Woods portrayed as having all of those qualities unapologetically and still being incredibly successful, going to Harvard Law, being the wonderful person that she is, was really empowering and inspiring for me. And, honestly, it's probably part of why I ended up going to Harvard.
That's amazing. That's amazing. A book or mentor that shaped your outlook on law or leadership?
Ooh, okay. That's a really good question. I would say a book that shaped my outlook on the law. There are a couple, but I'm going to go with The New Jim Crow. I read that book when I was in college. Highly recommend it to all the listeners. I think it's really helpful for kind of understanding some of the nuances of our criminal justice system and the importance of kind of understanding how it affects different groups, especially racial minorities. A mentor that has shaped my outlook on law or leadership. I've been so lucky to have so many wonderful mentors throughout my life. But of course, one who has always had a huge impact on me is Jane Brogan. She was my high school mock trial coach. From time to time, she actually helps out at the firm still.
Oh, cool.
So I've really been enjoying working with her and, getting back in touch with Jane. We never really lost touch, but getting to see her more has been really wonderful. And I think Jane is just such an example of a strong woman in law, someone who works hard. She's incredibly sharp and she cares. And I think that is just a wonderful combination.
Yeah, and she's a phenomenal teacher.
She is.
She's amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Dream vacation that you haven't taken yet?
Ooh, one of my best friends just took a trip to Ireland to attend a destination wedding. And I did have a really fun 12-hour layover in Dublin once. Story for another time. But I have been itching to go back to Ireland, and this just really sent me over the edge. So don't be surprised if you see some pics on my Instagram soon. I think one thing that really, really persuaded me was when they went to some place, I have no idea where it was, but you can pay to cuddle with baby lambs.
Oh.
I just thought that sounded so cute. So it's definitely on my bucket list.
Okay. Well, I think that we are going to go ahead and wrap up then. First of all, thank you. It was amazing. If somebody is listening and they want to get into contact with you, how do they do so?
Sure. So there are a lot of different ways that they can get in touch with us. They can go to our website, which is fillmanlawoffices.com. They can call our phone during office hours. The number is 402-362-3618. or they can email me directly. My email is on the website, but it's e@Elizabeth.fillmanlaw@outlook.com.
Awesome. And as always, if you guys are listening and you can't remember any of that, give us a call at the YCDC and we are happy to help you. So thank you again. Really, really appreciate it. And I cannot wait to see what's next because I'm sure that there's big things on the horizon.
Thank you, and thanks again for having me.
That's a wrap on another episode of the 17 County Podcast. As always, thank you for joining us to explore the business leaders, community champions, and transformational efforts shaping our regional economy. A final word of appreciation to our stakeholders: Central Valley Ag, Clutie Inc., Overland Ready Mixed, Collins Aerospace, Meade Lumber Company, Perennial Public Power District, Henderson State Bank, Midwest Bank, York State Bank, K-Junction OPPD, and Nebraska Public Power District. Your investment doesn't just support this podcast, it strengthens York County's momentum in innovation, growth, and long-term resilience. Until next time, stay engaged, stay informed, and continue supporting the businesses and partners that make our communities thrive.